So, good morning, friends. Once again, I welcome you back to this class of video lecture. Friends, this is MA final year English literature, and today we take up paper 5th. And paper 5th is of principles of literary criticism. So, in the previous class, we took up a very famous term, Orientalism. So that was unit 1 of Orientalism, and today we try again to discuss in a deep way what exactly the term Orientalism is. With all due respect for the pioneering work done by Commonwealth Literary Studies and by post-colonial writers such as Edward Braithwaite, Wilson Harris, Chinua Achebe, and Wole Soyinka, post-colonial studies in its current theoretically oriented form starts with the publication in 1978 of the Palestinian American critic Edward Said's book Orientalism. Yes, you have to keep in your mind these three pioneer writers such as Edward Braithwaite, Wilson Harris, Chinua Achebe, and Wole Soyinka. The post-colonial studies in its current theoretically oriented form starts with the publication in 1978 of the Palestinian American critic Edward Said's book Orientalism. Drawing on Foucault and to a lesser extent Gramsci, Said's study completely changed the agenda of the study of non-Western cultures and their literatures and pushed it in the direction of what we now call post-colonial theory. Orientalism is a devastating critique. Yes, the spelling of critique goes like CRITIQUE. Critique here means criticism. Orientalism is a devastating critique of how through the ages, again I repeat, Orientalism is a devastating critique of how through the ages, over the years, over the centuries, but particularly in the 19th century, the heyday of imperialist expansion, which is the book's focus, Western texts have represented the East and more specifically the Islamic Middle East. For the sake of convenience, it is simplified. It would simply refer to the Orient or the East here, right? So again I repeat, Orientalism is a devastating, considerable, important, significant critique of how through the ages, but particularly in the 19th century, the heyday of imperialist expansion, which is the book's focus, Western texts have represented the East and more specifically the Islamic Middle East. Using British and French scholarly works of literature, political tracts, journalistic texts, travel books, religious and philosophical studies. Yes, so again I simplify that it is a critique of how through the ages the East and the Middle East have been represented by the imperialist powers. Said examines how these texts construct the Orient through imaginative representations. in, for instance, novels, through seemingly factual descriptions in journalistic reports and travel writings, and through claims to knowledge about Oriental history and culture, histories, anthropological writings, and so on. Together, all these forms of Western writings form a Foucauldian discourse, a loose system of statements and claims that constitute a field of supposed knowledge and through which that knowledge is constructed. Such discourse, although seemingly interested in knowledge, always establish relationships of power. In Foucault's work, power is first of all a force that serves itself. Yes, this is a very tremendous statement given by Foucault. In Foucault's works, power is first of all a force that serves itself. Power is, self illuminating. Everyone wants to go by power, obtain power for the sake of power. We may think we use it for our own purposes in our capacity as free agents, but in reality, it works first of all through us and not for us. From Foucault's anti-humanistic perspective, we are functions within networks of power. For Sayyid, however, the West's representations of the East ultimately work within the framework of a conscious and determined effort at subordination. For Sayyid, Orientalism, this Western discourse about the Orient has traditionally served hegemonic purposes. Again, a term which you have to keep in your mind, hegemony. As we have seen, Antonio Gramsci thought of hegemony as domination by consent. Again, I repeat, Gramsci thought of hegemony as domination by consent. The way the ruling class succeeds in oppressing other classes with their apparent approval. In Gramsci's analysis, it does so through culture. The ruling class makes its own values and interests central in what it presents as a common neutral culture. Accepting that common culture, the other classes become complicit in their own oppression, and the result is a kind of velvet domination. Orientalism then has traditionally served two purposes. It has legitimized Western expansionism. Yes, again I repeat that Orientalism traditionally serves two purposes. First of all, it has legitimized Western expansionism and imperialism in the eyes of Western governments and their electorate, and it has insidiously worked to convince the natives that Western culture represented universal civilization. Accepting that culture could only benefit them, it would, for instance, elevate them from the backward or superstitious conditions in which they still lived and would make them participants in the most advanced civilization that world had ever seen. So, for Sayyid, Western representations of the Orient, no matter how well intentioned, have always been part of the damaging discourse. Willingly or unwillingly, they have always been complicit with the workings of Western power. Even those Orientalists who are clearly in sympathy with Oriental peoples and their cultures, and Sayyid finds a substantial number of them, cannot overcome their Eurocentric perspective and have unintentionally contributed to Western domination. So instead of the disinterested objectivity in the service of the higher goal of true knowledge that Western scholarship has traditionally claimed for itself, we find invariably false representations that have effectively paved the way for military domination, cultural displacement, and economic exploitation. I should perhaps say at this point that in later publications and in response to criticism, Sayyid has modified his position and presented a less homogeneous picture of Orientalism, while he is also downplayed the extent to which it merely constructs and never describes. There is no doubt, however, that Orientalism, whatever its shortcomings may have been, revolutionized the way Western scholars and critics looked at representations of non Western subjects and cultures. So, Sayyid's book Orientalism also drew attention to the way in which the discourse of Orientalism serves to create the West as well as it creates the East. West and East form a binary opposition in which the two poles define each other. Yes, the main crux of the study is that the discourse of the East and the discourse of the West create or form a binary opposition in which the two poles define each other. The West is projected, the East is projected with all biasedness. The inferiority that Orientalism attributes to the East simultaneously serves to construct the West's superiority. Yes, the West is superior and the East is inferior. Right? The sensuality, irrationality, primitiveness, and despotism of the East constructs the West as rational, democratic, progressive, and so on. Yes. So, again, I repeat, the East is full of sensuality, full of irrationality, primitiveness, and despotism of the East constructs the West as rational, democratic, progressive, and so on. The West always functions as the center, and the East is a marginal other that simply through its existence confirms the West's centrality and superiority. So, we shall keep on moving as far as the term Orientalism is concerned. I think you must have been able to pick up the theme of this term. Thank you, friends.